Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto anime review. This one is going to be for episode 141, which is called The Shinobi Prison Hozuki Castle. So immediately this is an interesting one because we've seen Hozuki Castle before. And there's obviously one of the Naruto Shippuden movies which focuses on it, and then it was also quite heavily used in the Kakashi light novel. So like we have experience with this thing. We know it's canon that this place exists, even though I think the Shippuden movie isn't considered canon outside of I think the idea that this is what the castle is used for and that celestial prison jutsu is a thing. But the details that Naruto went there isn't meant to be considered canon. So immediately there's okay, cool, what are we doing here? In that I thought we were going into the Mujina Bandits arc. And we actually are, in that this is the thing that I think that we have to get our heads around in a way as Boruto fans, that the anime is going to extend out what is covered in the manga. In that this arc, this Mujina Bandits arc, is a relatively small arc in the grand scheme of Boruto. So if they just went straight in where the manga goes in, we're getting through this in a handful of episodes. So I do appreciate the anime wanting to extend it out, because the way this arc works in the manga is you basically just jump in that Team Konohamaru finishes a mission where they're capturing other Mujina Bandit members, and then that's when the Daimyo's son kind of is introduced, and you get that, and that's when the boss, the main villain, Shojoji, that we're being set up, kind of comes in, and it's from there, it's just, the focused arc. So there was already set up in the manga that there was already this investigation into the Mujina Bandits going on. What the anime is doing here is kind of covering that sort of more from the beginning. So we get a sense that Boruto, Mitsuki, and Sarada are sort of quite heavily involved in the mission to find out stuff about the Mujina Bandits. So that makes a whole lot of sense. And we find out that one of the members is in Hozuki Castle and is actually willing to talk information about the Mujina Bandits and the details. So they decide to send Boruto and Mitsuki in as undercover prisoners, and Sarada in there as a reporter doing a report on the prison. So very, very cool setup straight away, in that even though this is not technically manga content, it doesn't feel like some of the other more fillery episodes of Boruto, because you have that connective tissue to the actually important stuff. And in terms of pacing and so on, this episode was intriguing the entire way through, because you're just kind of is this some sort of mistake? Have they been put in here by accident? But then straight away when you see the celestial prison, it is done differently on board. So you're oh, at least some of the people in the prison are in on this. And then they explain to you that okay, they have a good relationship with the current warden, Mujo, and so he is aware of that, even though they can't have the entire staff aware that there are kind of undercover prisoners in here. So yeah, this whole setup is very cool. Just the idea of it seems like this crazy mission, but because of the celestial prison jutsu, it means that it's not as dangerous as you think, just because that jutsu means that no one else is going to have jutsu, but Boruto and Mitsuki do whenever they decide to reveal that. So that all works really nicely. I did sort of have a little bit of a question in regards to who's Lord Mujo? This isn't the guy from the movie, the Naruto Shippuden movie, because I think he was killed at some point. And then this also isn't the female ninja who is made into the new warden of Hozuki Castle at the end of the Kakashi light novel. So what happened to her? She was a really interesting character from that book. Who is this guy? I know they get across the idea that the warden is traditionally someone from one of the clans who has the celestial prison jutsu, the fire style jutsu, and you see the second in command guy could be a little bit jealous about that, kind of making you a bit suspicious that he might be up to no good at some point, but we'll see how that plays out. There's just a little bit of continuity stuff with this that was a bit unclear on. Now, I understand that the Kakashi light novel has not been adapted into the anime, but as far as I know, all of the light novels are considered canon. Otherwise, why did they even make them? They're not the situation like some of the movies where like they're not really considered canon. This is 100% like meant to be considered canon. I know a lot of time like passes basically between that, which is kind of most of those early novels are set like in the post, defeat of Kaguya sort of era, those few years. So like Boruto isn't even born yet at this point, but it's kind of like, was she just filling in until a new member of this clan could be found or what? But then he seems quite old. It's just a little bit like, can we get some extra detail on this? Because it's just a little bit unclear. But we get introduced to like the cellmates of Boruto and Mitsuki, and there's a fun dynamic here in that like, they're not immediately going for the idea of everyone in prison is super cruel, which is a little bit overdone, and just the idea that there's immediately a little bit of camaraderie. There's a little bit of them trying to maybe exert their dominance, but then Mitsuki quite cleverly just reverses their logic on them. Of just like, oh, you stole Boruto's toothbrush because it was just lying around. I stole your magazine because it was just lying around. How about we trade and fix this whole problem? So I think that immediately worked to, get across the idea that, they're on the same level. There's a little bit of a dynamic between Boruto. They can maybe trust their cellmates and so on. But the main setup here eventually is that they have to figure out, okay, where is this guy? So they get the information that he's actually in the infirmary, because he got into a fight, and this is the only real way to be, I suppose, truly safe within the prison. It's this the word they use is oasis. It's an oasis within the prison. Because the doctor is actually fairly nice, but he is very strict about what he lets you stay in the infirmary for. So it has to be an actual injury or illness, otherwise you'll be told to leave immediately. So Boruto has to find a way to get into the infirmary to kind of link up with this guy, which he does after hearing this story that like there's these plants that grow nearby Hozuki Castle, kind of explaining the name, and if you eat one of the rare white ones instead of the red ones, it actually sort of, paralyzes your entire body. It doesn't seem to do any other damage beyond that. You're just kind of knocked out for a day and paralyzed for a bit, but then you're immediately kind of back to normal again. So in a pretty cool, I like the tension in this scene of like just before they're called in from their break, and they have to get this fruit. And so Mitsuki sends out one of his snakes, and it's just the real tension of they're being called back in. Boruto has to quickly make up an excuse for why they're not coming in straight away. His slave gets tagged on the fence, and eventually they do it, and he just... I like that there was no hesitation about it. Boruto just eats the thing like straight away and is sent to the infirmary where he meets the guy. And after a little bit of, tension, he's worried, he's very protective and so on about, himself, and worried. He links up with Boruto, realizes that, the letter I sent, this is what they're doing about it, and it's just the setup that like they're gonna work together, find a way to fix all of this. But as Boruto's sort of been taken away, because obviously he's woken up at this point, someone orders this kind of hit on the guy, and he gets stabbed, not killed. It just seems like he has a kind of flesh wound style injury, but there is this sense of like, someone within the prison is trying to take out this guy to sort of counter what Boruto and the Leaf Village want out of the situation. And again, this is where like that Mujina Bandit arc kind of section is kind of coming into things. And this is where like, what I liked especially about this episode is that like, you don't feel like you're fully up to speed on everything just yet. It's going to take a few episodes of just this Hozuki Castle section to fully understand what exactly is going on here. Because in the grand scheme of things, like even in the manga, like the whole what the Mujina Bandits are isn't explored particularly well. So I'm glad that they're giving some extra, information to us here on them by just covering them some more. It'll make when we finally get to that manga content all the more meaningful because we've had all this setup. Beyond that, it was cool to see like Sarada wearing a completely different outfit and just, doing a different type of undercover stuff. Like Boruto and Mitsuki are just, once they don't immediately reveal their jutsus, they're just by default undercover. Sarada has a little bit more acting to do to actually get across the idea that she's a journalist and for her to learn what's going on. So it'll be interesting to see when everything sort of breaks down, like how she gets involved, what exactly Boruto and Mitsuki, what do they wait for to finally use their jutsu, and then who the major threats are before we get like out of Kozuki Castle and set up the whole rest of this arc. So yeah, I think a surprisingly good episode, and that I actually really want to learn more about what's going on here. I'd like more detail on Kozuki Castle, the wardens, just a lot of what's going on here. I do really, really like it. So yeah, very solid start to kind of getting into some canon content. So definitely a positive episode from me. But yeah, that's been the my review of the episode. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.